Cloudcast Media presents from the massive studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is the Cloudcast with Aaron Delp and Brian Gracely, bringing you the best of cloud computing from around the world.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome back to the Cloudcast. We are coming to you live from the massive Cloudcast studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina. Joining us, as we always do, on Cloud and AI News of the Month, Brandon Whichard from Software Defined Talk. Brandon, how are you, man?
I'm very good, and I'm excited because I believe this is the transition show, right? This is the last Cloudcast, and we're going to roll right into the reasoning show. So I feel honored to be part of the handoff.
Yeah, no, it is. This is, officially the last official The Cloudcast show. For those of you that didn't listen to last week's show, as many of you sometimes will get backed up, we are continuing the feed. You will not have to change anything, but we are changing the name of the show to the Reasoning Show, or shorthand for Reasoning. We'll be a little more AI focused, probably a lot more AI focused, but still doing some cloud stuff. But this will officially be the last of this era. So 15 or so years. I think we started in February and ending in February. So I got a couple of questions for you, a couple of topics before we get into the normal AI and cloud chatter. Football's over. Football, we can't do the show without talking about football. Football is officially over.
Football's life.
As the regular guest on the show, do you feel like we need to officially acknowledge any other sports, or do we just sort of, have a gap for 5 or 6 months?
Well, I just feel like the Olympics, we had to. I mean, I watched the USA hockey, men's and women's, and very exciting. I mean, I'm not going to pretend I'm like a true hockey fan, but throw on the red, white, and blue, get up. I think it was like a little bit early where I was, like 7 a.m., throw it on. They score a goal in whatever overtime or extra periods, whatever. That was fantastic. So yeah, I would say I'm like a tourist in other sports. I just I was like, oh, this is the last game. Something exciting is going to happen. Let's put it on. So those sports I do acknowledge.
Yeah, I feel like the Olympics, there's still an aspect of the Olympics that's like sport, and we like, I don't know, we either love the underdog story or like the great overtime something event or whatever. But I feel like it's become very human interest story, like even more so than it used to be. I do feel like my wife, although she's probably past the age where you'd be a TV correspondent, she might be the greatest Olympic correspondent there, because there is nobody who is better at figuring out human interest stories than my wife. Just from random people, meet them at the grocery store, meet them at anywhere. She would, now that they have these sideshows, like I might need to figure out a way to get my wife a job with like NBC or somebody, because she could do a 24-hour a day, like just human interest stories about people. She's been telling about the curling people's, kids, and the hockey girls, brothers, and but she would find all of these. In fact, she would probably find so many, it might spawn its own reality show. But yeah, I've been gone. I've been traveling some. She's been sending me human interest stories for 2 weeks now about the Olympics. So I feel like this is her
let's
calling.
go one step further. I think we need to, maybe this shouldn't just be announcing the Reasoning Show. You should be announcing what we call Human Interest by Brian's wife. That's what we should get on, because you know what? Probably a show like that would do extremely well. That's what probably people want, actually.
I know. The hard part's Olympics only every 2 years, every 4 years. It'd be a lot of filler shows. A lot of we're just hanging out, we're waiting. But yeah, it's a possibility.
I like it.
Here's my other one. So long time listeners will know this. You guys on Software Defined Talk just did a show called Two Guys and Tokens or something like that?
Yeah, Two Guys and Their Tokens.
Two Guys and Their Tokens. So anybody who has listened to this show for a long time, I don't think we've discussed it in probably the original name for this show. So this is not the first time we're switching the name of the Cloudcast. It's actually the second time. The original name for the show was called Two Guys, One Wire. And well, because it was during the days when there was sort of like unified computing was coming out, and it was this whole idea of like, everything's going to run over the network, storage and compute and all this sort of stuff. And then a longtime friend of the show, listener Stu Miniman, said, "Hey, you guys may want to look up this thing called Two Girls, One Cup, because you guys are dangerously close to that meme." So yeah, the original show was Two Guys, One Wire, eventually became the Cloudcast. But here's my theory. I like your idea of, the way to solve migration problems is to take two people who are sort of experts in adjacent technologies, right? Your whole idea, the whole context of this was you guys were talking about like COBOL evaluation or COBOL modernization. We'll get into this. And your idea was, take a really smart COBOL engineer, if you can find them, and then a really smart whatever, Java engineer, put those two people together in a room, and then like unlimited tokens, and they'll go solve, whatever the problem is, right? That was sort of your theory, which
absolutely, yep.
I think is fine. It's really hard to scale that, right? You got to find a lot of two-person pairs. But I want to come back to this thing I was thinking about. We've sort of gone away from the idea of being fascinated with the two-person sort of miracle, right? Like that was the origin story of like Silicon Valley, right? It was Hewlett and Packard. It was Jobs and Wozniak. Cisco was started by like a husband and wife team out of Cisco, right? There was a lot of like sort of two-person, multi-person teams. And we were always fascinated, I think, with this idea of like two people who probably have very different personalities, right? Like you'd probably never put them together by themselves because one is very introverted, one's extroverted, one's got really good skills in this space, and and we don't really have that anymore. Like we don't even, I think the last one that we sort of were fascinated by was AWS being sort of Andy Jassy and Werner Vogels, even though I don't know that they were truly the founders of AWS, depends who you ask. But we've sort of gotten into this idea of like, the singular, genius, right? The Jeff Bezos at Amazon.
Mark Zuckerberg.
Right? Do you think we need to get back to the two guy? I feel like the two guy theory, the two person theory tends to it creates very sustainable companies because they figure out how to do their things, but also just less assholes in general, less, just men. But I don't know. Do you feel like we need the two people, or do you feel like our society now can't handle that? They need the one person, the singular sort of person, being the smart person.
I'd say two-part answer here is like, I actually think most of these companies, when you dig behind the scenes, it is usually a couple people that are working on it. So it is like, let's call it like there really are mostly two people or like small teams, like even like OpenAI. If we go into OpenAI, right, and we go back in time, we'd find a couple really key people there. But what happens is kind of back to like a little bit talking about almost like your wife's thing. It's like people like stories, right?
Yeah,
and the stories that people like to tell is the hero's journey. Like, this one person rose above it all and did everything. And that is probably what gets popularized. So probably what we need to get back to is maybe just kind of what you're alluding to. Like maybe we just need to like share the credit a little bit more willingly and be like, it's rarely one person can do every conceivable thing, right? It's really usually... And it usually is somebody that's more front facing that often takes a lot of the credit, but the behind the scenes. And I think, that AWS story is a great example. It's like, I don't know, when you really dig into it, there's like a couple of different groups, like one working on EC2, one working on S3, and one working on, some of the, I can't remember, maybe something else. And it was like those kind of teams kind of all together did it. But, that part is never really told. It's just like, I think it's always Andy Jassy wrote the memo. And, the rest is history. But,
Right.
So I like it. So, yeah, I mean, to your point, it would be good. Let's share the credit a little bit more. There's plenty of success to go around. Let's give it out. It doesn't have to be just one person.
Yeah. I do feel like looking at the current crop of AI companies, it's a little confusing, right? Like it's, I don't think people would say Sam Altman is the sort of, creator of OpenAI. I think Dario is starting to at least put his wife out a little bit. Like he's figuring out maybe I should share some credit a little bit. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this shakes out. I feel like there was 3 big stories this month. We put, obviously, like we always do, we put a lot of, maybe there was 4. I feel like there's maybe 3 or 4 big stories this month. Lots of things in the show notes. On the cloud side, Linux 7.0 came out. Are you excited about Linux 7.0? Are you upgrading all of your servers around your house or in your data center to 7.0?
We talked a little bit about on our show over Software Defined Talk, but like I'm only really interested in it because I think I'm really looking for it. I'm trying to get everyone's prediction. It's like whatever the next major release of Linux is, 8.0, whatever you want to call it. Like my question is like how much of the code in that will be generated by AI? And just to put my cards on the table, like I'm at like 85 to 90%. But of course, the Linux kernel group, which you probably know more about than I do, was like famously like, kind of slow to adopt new things, which is probably good. Right? We don't want the Linux kernel like, kind of doing weird things. But I think it's going to, I just think this is sort of like, it's like a demarcation point. It's like if Linux starts to accept or starts to use a lot of AI coding, which I can't imagine why they wouldn't, then that's going to be like a real milestone. So that's really the only thing I personally am interested in. But like other than that, though, I heard everyone says Linux now, or the Apple hardware is like better supported. So that's always good. That way the Linux nerds out there can get the cool Apple MacBooks and run Linux. So, but me, no, I'm still running Mac OS.
Yeah. No, I agree. Yeah, the Linux kernel team is very, very, very old school, which, I mean, I guess considering that it is the foundation of the entire internet, basically everything, I guess it's good that those folks are very determined to be pragmatic about stuff. I feel like, and I don't know what the timings are. I think the Linux has come out maybe every 3 years or so. I think the other question is going to be like, is this the last major release for Linus? Like at some point he's going to, want to step away from this. Probably famously doesn't want to step away from it. But yeah, I think 8 becomes the one where it's like, how involved is Linus? Is he, still what is it? A benevolent dictator for life? And then how much AI is released? So this one's probably not super, super interesting except for the Apple stuff. And then friend of the show, kind of AWS, what would you call him? Provocateur, I guess. Corey Quinn.
Provocateur, I like those, yeah.
Podcaster. Corey Quinn of the Duckbill Group is moving out of the consulting business, moving into the software business. Made an announcement, took some money from venture capital, which is always going to be interesting. He's no longer wearing a suit. He's become sort of the long-haired, I don't know, dad, kind of middle-aged sort of thing, but he's making software. He's in the cloud cost management business. And I would think, his team has lots of experience in this. The question becomes, can you turn all of they're probably a perfect example of like, can you turn all of your internal instincts and experience into software? Because that seems like what they're doing with this new round of funding. I don't know, it's around $10 million or something like that. So unfortunately, I don't think he's going to get to build his own data center, but congratulations to Corey on evolving that.
Well, traditionally, this is one of the best ways to start a company is you do consulting for a long time.
Yeah.
Because that forces you to learn all the problems. And then you sort of have this playbook. You're like, I go in and I do this thing every place. And then that is the foundation for like really understanding the problem set and building software. But I do think it's kind of fun for Corey because he has kind of made his whole persona as sort of taking shots at in a fun way, in a jovial way, at AWS being like, look how stupid their naming is, or like, why did they do this? This AWS service doesn't do something that's obvious, right? And it's like, so it'll be interesting when the shoe is on the other foot, right? Like, well, it's like, okay, when you start building software, you start to learn why it's like you don't have all the features, or you have to make naming choices. So that's going to be kind of fun for just for me watching. It's like, okay, well, how does he handle it when people are like, I can't believe the Duckbill Group software like doesn't support, Azure, or doesn't, do this thing that's obvious or has this obvious error. So that's going to be maybe the more fun side of it. And then, of course, too, like he's in an interesting but crowded, I'm kind of putting him in the FinOps group. I don't know if that's fair. Yeah. But it's like, it's an interesting area, but like there's tons of people inside of FinOps. So it's also going to be fun for him. It's like, okay, well, like, it's almost like you're entering the arena, which is fun. It's like you've been on the sidelines, you've been kind of a pundit, but now you're going into the arena with everybody else. And so that's always fun to watch.
Yeah. We wish him the best of luck. Yeah. It's going from a consultant to an operator is a very different transition. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how.
Yeah. Most importantly, he needs to be advertising on all of these podcasts that we have. That's his most important thing. Give us some of that VC money.
Absolutely. Well, the other good thing is he did highlight that it's him and I forget what the other guy's name is, Mike, who's his co-founder. So he is a two-man group. He does sort of check our box of, trading,
Yeah, it's Mike Julian. Let's give him his full due. Mike Julian. And
that's right.
It's like one has a lot of hair, one doesn't. So that's an easy way for us to know who they are.
That's right. One wears a suit, one doesn't, and it's not the same way as it used to be. So yeah, congratulations to those two guys. All right. I think there's 3 or 4 AI stories we need to get into. First question I got to ask though is, and again, this is emblematic of like what's going on in the AI space. We've been doing this for a while now. Last year was all about Cursor. Mm-hmm. What happened to Cursor? I have not heard a thing from Cursor in, I feel like at least 3 or 4 months. Like, I don't want to say are they gone, but like, what's going on?
Well, I think what happened was Claude Code happened to Cursor, as well as, there's all the other ones, basically command line development. And I think the key learning, and I went through the same process I would ask anyone to do, is like the learning here, the jump is like when you go away from like, I don't need the IDE. I just tell this thing what I want it to do, and it does all of that work. And I'm not really, if you will, pair programming. I'm product managing Claude Code or Google's version of it, and it's doing everything. And it's like, you don't really need, I think, for a lot of us, it's like, you don't really need Cursor. Don't be in the IDE. Just ask the tool to do what you want it to do. And then if it makes a mistake. So I think Cursor is like, it really is in a precarious situation. I think it was sort of like they were like the ultimate transition. I was about to say the ultimate transition girlfriend or something, transition partner. It's like, oh, this is good. And then you're like, no, that's actually not what I wanted. I actually found true love somewhere else. So I think it's good. And I say this as someone that loved Cursor as much as anyone. When I first saw it, I loved it. I was huge in, but I'm like, I don't even fire it up anymore. I'm like, why would I waste time inside that? I'm just on the command line, just speaking regular English. Like, that's not right. Do this. That's all I say. So I don't know. Tough situation for him.
Yeah, no, I and again, I'm not knocking them. I think they might end up being a first ballot Docker Hall of Famer, though. They should have taken the money, did a lot of interviews. Everybody couldn't believe how fast they were growing. But yeah, you're right. I think they're going to be emblematic of we saw this in the cloud as well. And eventually it kind of not flipped, but like when you're doing a transition, like you need to not be tied to the old thing. Like you need to be the new experience, and they were a transitional experience, like you said. While that's cool, the people you were competing against could give you a completely new, completely native experience, and people are just like, all right, it's 10x better. So,
well, and I think the thing that we should mark it down, because I think this is a really good example, is as all of these tools, sort of like there's step one is like, let me just use AI to make my current tool better, right? And that is very enticing. And I think when you first see it, you're like, yeah, this is good. This is what we want. And it's like, actually, no. The people that go further that are like, no, let me just do everything for you.
Right.
It's just sort of like, that's where the gold is. And I think that's where Cursor sort of maybe missed the mark, or they kind of got a false positive. We all were like, to get there, we all needed to see the code being generated and kind of see what happened. And then we're like, oh, we didn't need to look anymore. So I think for everyone building AI into your tool, it's like, wait a minute, is someone else just using AI to solve the whole problem? Right. And if they are, you may be in a weird situation there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that leads into sort of the next big story isn't so much just like one story. It was like, we are right now living in the year of Anthropic, the year of Claude, the year of Anthropic. Anthropic, it felt like every week this year, and I don't know what happened. Oh, there we go. I'm back. I'm like, my camera doesn't matter. This show's not video. It felt like every week this month, Anthropic was announcing something that not only spooked a whole bunch of people, but also got the stock market to freak out. Everything from they announced Claude Cowork, which was like, Claude for, regular normies, everyday white collar workers, plugs into all of your tools. They shocked the COBOL market by saying, hey, we now support COBOL, which, I guess is kind of to your old point. Like people have been saying you can modernize COBOL for a long time, even IBM, and it shocked the market, shocked IBM stock price. They announced they had a whole event called Enterprise Agent. So we had a whole month of software. You and I talked about this, like the whole software market, the SaaS market kind of got smacked around because people were like, oh, wait a second. So you don't need SaaS anymore, which, again, debatable, but they sort of came over the top of that and started announcing, hey, we're just going to plug into all of your tools. So to your point of like, they are doing the slow sort of creep up on all of the SaaS people, but like not on their back. They've now gone face to face with them and been like, no, just plug into us. Don't worry, it'll be good. Because obviously people love your stuff, right? Wink, wink, like, and the SaaS people are like, people love our stuff. You see what's Mark Benioff out there like, oh, people love Salesforce. They just, which is, I think it's on the Brandon.
It's
manifesto.
Funny to hear when you say it out loud. It's comical.
It's on the Brandon manifesto of like, nobody loves Salesforce.
Nobody loves that.
But Anthropic is, I don't know if they're planning to go IPO this month, but boy, they have put out so much raw meat for people to be like, oh yeah, the software industry, yes, you will just give us all of your money. Like all of your money will eventually transition to us. It's been an interesting month. But in typical Anthropic manner, you're like, oh, all good stuff. Oh wait, the Department of Defense is threatening to classify you as a supply chain risk because you won't, actually them doing good stuff. The DoD wants them to use AI to do like autonomous, spying on American citizens and like killing people. And they said, no, that's the line. We're not going to do that. But interesting month for Anthropic. And is Dario now the new king of AI, at least for a few months?
Well, I think, it's really interesting because they've had quite like, almost call it like the comebacks. Not like they went anywhere, but I think people kind of like wrote them off. And I think what they figured out, and maybe by accident, maybe by strategy, is like the enterprise play really seems much more compelling suddenly than the consumer play, right? Because it's like, this is a little Ben Thompson. Ben Thompson's like, OpenAI needs to do an advertising model, whereas Anthropic is basically like, we're going to sell you tools, right, that you can use in your enterprise. And you start using them, whether it be Claude Code or Cowork, and they're awesome, right? And you feel, I kind of joke, it's like, if you start doing this in a certain way, you feel kind of this intoxicating flow of like, I'm getting stuff done, I'm building stuff as fast as I can think. I can like see code and documents being created. And it sort of like seems completely separate from OpenAI. I know they have codecs and their own products as well, but it's just like, they don't seem as good. Like they don't seem to be working on that as much. And it's like that combined with this kind of natural positioning of like, hey, we're, I'll put it in good, quote unquote good, or using AI for good has been a really natural kind of contrast to OpenAI, right? Who's sort of like constantly, and it's like, it has really been amazing to watch. And it's like, I don't know, going forward, I think when I first originally saw OpenAI, the thought I would pay $100 a month for it was crazy. And now the thought that I'm only paying 30, I'm like, I'm not getting enough out of this. I probably need to pay 100, and I'm using exclusively Anthropic for all that work. I mean, it's amazing. So it's like, it's going to be a real interesting, like kind of a stratechery Ben Thompson kind of thing. It's like where we kind of all focused in on the next Google, right? But really it was the next set of enterprise tools, and Anthropic is kind of just owning that market. And is what my co-host always says. It's like at some point does AWS or someone buy them, right? Because that's like the natural fit. They have all the enterprise tools, so it feels like they would be a perfect acquisition target. Maybe they're just gotten too expensive at this point to do it for someone that wants to sell to the enterprise. So Anthropic, I don't know, month of Anthropic, 6 months of Anthropic. So maybe, who knows, maybe in 6 months we'll be onto somebody new, but an incredible a run for them, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I think it highlights a couple of things. I know even when we were thinking about originally doing, changing the Cloudcast and stuff, like we thought at one point, because it's gone back, I don't know, almost a year now or 9 months. Like at one point we were like, we're going to do the entire show about OpenAI. We're just going to do all things OpenAI because we were like, they're going to run everything. And I feel like ever since then, every 2 or 3 months, there's somebody who's like, okay, OpenAI is way out in front. And then it was like, all right, Google figured out all their stuff. They figured out ads. They figured out Gemini's now working. They got the team, it's like that. And now it feels like Anthropic. So yeah, it does feel like maybe we're going to have these every 2 or 3 months. Somebody's just going to be like, all right, it's our turn to lay all our cards out on the table and be like, we're out in front. And it's going to be interesting for a few reasons. One, I think to the Ben Thompson point, I think Ben is really good at looking at macro level things. I don't know that he's great at looking at enterprise stuff, because in his mind, he looks at it in the classic kind of Silicon Valley way of like, well, enterprise is nothing. It's not interesting. It's old. It's boring. It's slow. But, it does make a lot of money. Maybe not as much as like, Google search or something. He's very good at the aggregated stuff. So he gets why OpenAI, if they want to go after consumer, has to be about aggregation. I don't know that he necessarily totally gets the Anthropic is becoming very good at being like, I'm going to be precisely go after this type of task. I'm going to solve that problem. And I'm going to go after this problem. But yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's to your AWS point. I mean, if you think about it, and we'll see how time will tell. I mean, Anthropic and AWS and Anthropic was sort of the first tie-up when you had Azure and OpenAI, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like everyone's like, all right, well, OpenAI is with Azure and AWS is with Anthropic. And I wonder if we're going to look back a year from now, 2 years from now, and be like, I know you guys, OpenAI or AWS had we're doing primitives, like, and that was their model. That was their way of thinking. Everything was going to be like open. Bedrock was going to support lots of models. I think they may end up looking back on this and being like, that might be the biggest mistake in AWS history of not acquiring Anthropic or tying them up more than they did. Because even now, like, it looks like they are, they're one of the big funders in the next round of OpenAI, and they're making a big deal about being aligned to OpenAI and don't really talk about Anthropic that much anymore. If you think about AWS's business, I guess, they're in two sides of the fence, right? Because they have a lot of consumer apps that run on AWS. But I feel like, looking at it, I think they're going to, because they can't buy OpenAI, right? I mean, there's no way to buy it, but they could have bought Anthropic back in the day. It's going to be interesting to sort of see how that plays out.
Well, to your point, I think, we're recording this on Friday the 27th, and today was just the announcement of, there's a big announcement from AWS and OpenAI working together. And it did, my initial thought was like, I think maybe they're playing like last week's game, right? Yeah. It's like they're preparing for last week's opponent, and they sort of maybe gave up a little bit on Anthropic, because I'm sure this OpenAI announcement's been in the works for like 6 months longer. And it's like, but in the last few months, it's like, no, wait a minute. I think I think your original thing was actually the right way to go. And now we're so desperate to get to OpenAI, you may have like actually missed it. And I think one thing that, I don't know if it's brilliant marketing or anything, but like the one thing Anthropic is either stumbling into or strategically doing is like, they made this huge announcement. This was sort of like, hey, you know, we now can help modernize COBOL, which I think is funny because like, if you've used Claude Code or anything, it's like, it can modernize anything. Like next week, they could announce like, we now support migrating C and C++ to Rust, or now we support like it does everything. So it's like, so they can just almost just continuously announce this. And I don't think people that are like, not enough people are in it to like see that. And it's like, so they announce it and they're like, well, we got to take IBM down. And it's like, listen, this does everything. Like there's almost no language you can't go from A to B. And if it cannot do it, I would highly question what you're doing. Like if Anthropic has no idea how to do it, like you may be in a place you don't want to be. So I expect them to be, you know, modernizing C++, you know, all of this stuff. Like you can just say it forever. And it's like, and I think that's a really good message for them. And I think they can continue to kind of shape their message and the market by keep doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's going to be, I think the more they can, I heard an interesting statement from somebody recently, and they were like, well, the reason businesses exist is to solve problems. And I think they have been much more on point message-wise and example-wise of like, oh, here's a problem you have in your business that you pay money to fix. Here's a solution for it. Whereas I feel like OpenAI has sort of drifted into the, you know, we have to focus on just big giant numbers. And so, you know, we're the everything for everybody. And at some point, you know, when you're everything for everybody, you're not anything for anybody. And it feels like they're kind of going down that shift a little bit.
And not only that, the brilliance of it too is like they can say that, and then they're always kind of pointing back to the same solution, which is really at the bottom is like obviously the model. Right above that's Claude Code. Right above that is Claude Desktop. Right above that is like, oh sure, we can modernize C++ for you. And it's the same thing. It's just the same solution over and over. So it's a nice playbook. Like I would think next month they're going to have something else. Like we now do this, and it's kind of brilliant. And then, you know, and then you have OpenAI out there, right? They're like, we just bought, hired the founder of OpenClaw, and we're all like, what is that? What are we going to do with that? So you kind of see like how different it is, right, between the two.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to watch. I think they're now going to be the next one that's going to be on Revenue Watch, you know, every month, every quarter, like how much are you making? What are you forecasting? Because, you know, OpenAI, you know, obviously, you know, AI is expensive, inference is expensive, chips, you know, training's expensive. You know, they're now a little bit stuck in the quagmire of like, okay, everyone's doing the math because they're like, okay, they're going to eventually go IPO. And, you know, they're still talking about like, we're going to burn through $650 billion, you know, by 2030. So in the next 4 years, we're going to burn through, you know, more money than anybody ever has. And Anthropic really hasn't gone down that path, although they did just raise another $30 billion. I mean, their one kind of huge but weakness at this point is they still don't really own the means of production. I mean, they own the model, they can train the model, but they don't own their own chips. They're dependent on somebody else for chips. They don't own data centers per se, right? They're dependent on. So I mean, the two of the hugest, you know, things that will impact their cost, they don't really own. So they're going to be an interesting sort of, you know, follow the money, follow the burn versus the revenue kind of thing.
But as we play it forward, I'd love to get your take on this. It's like for a while there, I think it was OpenAI's like, hey, let Anthropic go public, sort of like be the market test, right? And then they would do it. And now does that flip a little bit? Can Anthropic go public in a way that maybe with like a slightly more, this is crazy to say, a slightly more rational cap table and, you know, accounting statement? And like, is that a way for them to actually kind of like potentially jump OpenAI, right? So it's almost like the first to go public and the first to kind of like show that like we do have growth in the enterprise. Like, does that sort of often, like, does money start to funnel into them because they're public quickly while OpenAI sits on the sidelines? So I think that's a really interesting story. It's almost like the IPO goes from like, if you will, you were going to be the test bed to like, not only could you go first, but you could jump and become the leader. So I would be worried about that if I was OpenAI. It's like, if they get out there first, do they become the leaders in this, or the perceived leaders in AI?
Yeah, I think there's a chance that Anthropic does a better job of painting the story that Wall Street has to live under, like painting the structure. Because again, you know, you're going to be doing sort of the thing that Amazon did back in the day, which was like, wait a second, you guys want the stock to go up, but you're not talking about any revenue. You're talking about revenues, but you're not talking about profits, and they're going to be at a loss for a period of time. It's just, how long do people believe in their vision versus being like, okay, how long can you lose money? How fast are you growing? And yeah, I think right now they are doing a better job of finding people that are willing to, I feel like every day there's somebody evangelizing about being like, here's what I did individually. It was me and a month, basically what you were talking about. Like I got into flow state for a month and I built this thing. And I feel like I could do this for everything now. And you're starting to see that more and more of those stories come up. The other hard part about that, which will be interesting to watch, is I feel like every one of these stories are an individual. Like they are, it's very little of like, hey, me and my team figured out a way to jointly do this. It's sort of like I built my own team. My own team is like me and 25 agents. And I wonder from an enterprise perspective, if you're like, it's the sort of classic, like, enterprises are built around teams and the idea of like, you have the best people and then you have other people. And this becomes like, okay, how am I going to manage this? How would I manage this thing? Which enterprise thinks about as much as anything else is like, how do I manage it? Because people come and go. It still feels like that, like AI is a very individual sport at this point. It's very much not like a team sport yet. And I think that'll be the next really big thing to figure out if somebody can crack that a little bit, or at least, start to talk about like, hey, how does a team work around this stuff? And get,
I think,
or does that force multiplier even matter? Like,
and I always say it's like, it really is a bottoms up technology, right?
Yeah.
That's where the leverage is. And I do think, it's kind of back to this IBM statement for a while. It's like, I don't know, whether IBM can or cannot, modernize COBOL. Well, certainly it can. First of all, I'll start there. But it's really just like, it may just be easier at this point. And kind of, I was joking before, it's like, you just get a couple people doing it, right? You don't need you don't need the massive team and structure of like a services company coming in and doing this anymore. And it's just easier that way. So is I go forward and I always think, the joke I always think about now is like, listen, if I'm going to the AWS meeting where we're about to review my project, like I'm not bringing the 6-page memo. I'm bringing a working version 1. I'm like, here it is. This is what it does. And here's how it works. And like everyone can start using it. Like, why not? Like that, it'll probably take you as long to write a memo as it would to actually sit down, use your favorite coding assistant and build out like a very good version 1. So I think that's like, but that's going to be very hard for like, we're just using AWS example. That's going to be very hard for a company to kind of grasp because most of it's like, show me a proposal, I'll fund you. There's checkpoints versus like you just walk into the room like, I'm done. Like I have version 1, like I'm ready to launch this, or I want you to, like, it's really not asking for money. It's like, I need you to now help me get customers. I want you to help to assign the sales force to do this. I'm not asking for anything. And I think that's just executives, just like their minds break, right? It's like, where was the meeting? How did we do this? What's going on? And it's like, no, that's not how this world works.
Yeah. It's interesting to think about. I mean, early in, and I know this sounds like a long time, but literally in like 20, 25 years, we went from, if you wanted to fund a company, for example, right? Like, so 2000, you went to Silicon Valley, you said, hey, I have this great idea, which was probably a couple of PowerPoints and some spreadsheets. They gave you $50 million. You went and gave 30 or 40 million to Cisco and you bought hardware and then you hired
Cisco,
some people.
Oracle,
You started writing code, all this sort of stuff. But like, it was based on, okay, is your spreadsheet really good? Do you guys have experience in this space? What does the team look like? Then it eventually became like, okay, the entry point's much cheaper. I'm going to give you $5 to $10 million. What I want from you is a proof of concept. You don't even need to have market fit or whatever. And it was still probably like half, here's some code, half, here's, at least a picture or two. And then it, evolved to six pagers, like, okay, whatever. But you were still, the whole thing of that was like, you were still kind of betting on the people, like the experience of the people. And your example, which I think is going to be very realistic, is like, you're going to walk in, you're going to go, I got a great idea, and here's a working something, whether you call it a prototype or a working system or whatever. And they're going to kind of have to bet on like, okay, well, what were your Anthropic best practices? Because you're kind of figuring out like, okay, well, I mean, it seems to work. I don't have necessarily a way to show it at scale, but maybe you can even show it at scale. But if you're just like Brandon, and they're like, man, Brandon, I used to know you as like a project manager, or you were like a junior coder, or you were just like the finance guy. Like, there's not that same level of like, oh yeah, okay, you've built 4 other companies having done this, or, you've got a PhD from Stanford. It's just going to be like, no, man, I just followed the Anthropic best practices to the T, and I have a great idea.
Well, I even go one step further because I think, because it's funny you said like Oracle and Sun. It's like, this is what you do now is you sit down with Claude, you build your thing out, and then you kind of talk to Claude and it's like, how should I deploy it? And you do it. You sign up for the free plan at fly.io. That's going to run your business logic. Yeah. You sign up for the free plan at Neon. That's your scalable Postgres thing. Yeah. You sign up for Cloudflare, 10 gigs free. I mean, all these ideas, like, and basically, at the beginning, you're not using anything because like no one's using your product, your ideas. So you're just playing around. And it's like, so you sign up for all those free plans. It's completely working on the internet. You walk right in the room. You'll be like, everyone sign up, right? You implement email authentication, like no password, and be like, okay, I want everyone. And it's like that kind of like, that's the mentality I have when I'm building stuff. It's like, I'm going to the meeting. I'm going to tell everyone, sign up for you. Right now, we're all going to walk through. We're going to start using it. It's like, we're not going to read a memo. We're not doing it. It's like, we're actually using the thing. And then, and people can start to judge it right away because that's the point where like ideas can live or die. It's like, okay, you start to get in front of customers. Maybe people don't want it. Maybe it's the bad idea. But like it's like you've got yourself to kind of like the actual real decision point. But I just think like you've shortcutted, like, I don't know, like what you said there is probably right. Like 25 years of if you will, best practices, you've completely jumped over, right? Yeah. And you're just like, I've got the entire thing running right now. Do we think it's a good idea? And I think that's exciting.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, and the crazy thing is, in those old meetings, people would have a whole bunch of questions for you. And they'd be like, well, what if they want to stress test it? They want to, I mean, you literally could be like, you'd like to see what that would change would look like if I had to do, like, you could do it on the fly. You could be like, let me, hang on, let me go in, let me ask it to translate this to Chinese and make it look like this. And that the thing that worried you? Okay, cool. Like, that's what it would look like. Or
right. Yeah, I think even too, when people like the scalability thing, like, what if does it scale to like 500,000 users? Like, okay, well, you know what? If that's important, let's sit down right now. We're going to spin up 500,000 users and we'll see what happens. Right. And if it doesn't work, we'll do? Like, we'll tell Cloud Code, be like, hey, it broke here, here, and here. Let's fix it. And then, because I mean, also too, I think some of those questions I always feel like a lot of those questions are disingenuous. And it's like the ultimate, like, I can fix that for you right now if it's really important. Now, what's more important is we don't have 500,000 users. That's probably the question we should be asking in this meeting today. That would be my retort, right? It's like, right. So it's fun, though. I think there's lots of stuff happening out there like that.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting time. I think the last big news item that came out it came out in the last month, but it's kind of continued, is OpenClaw. This idea of, I forget what it was originally called. I think it was called Moltbot. It was
Clawbot was the first one.
Clawbot. It was a spinoff of Claude, and now it's called OpenClaw. Have you played around with this thing yet at all?
I've just read about it. Yeah. Not as much as I like to try new stuff. This was like one step too dangerous for me, right? This idea that like I'm going to install it on my Mac and just like let it go to town and do anything. But I understand. I think I think it's going to go down as sort of like it's proven. The concept of this personal AI assistant that just kind of lives on your machine and can do anything. Yeah. Clearly there's something there and people really want it, but there's also there's like, even I like to be wide open, I'm not the person that usually wants to, but like this is a step too far. So I think the next step will be like, can they figure out a way? And this is, I think, why why OpenAI hired the founder is like, can you find a way to package it up in just a little bit more simple / secure way that gives people a little bit more control over what's going to happen? But it is certainly popularized the idea of like, it's just like, why do I even sit at the computer? I just have OpenClaw do everything that I would have done at the computer anyway, which is, again, back to kind of where we originally started. It's just like, how far back in the chain can you go? It's like, do I even need to be in front of the computer to do the stuff? No, OpenClaw will do a lot of it, and people love that idea. So I'm excited to see like how it gets, if you will, productized going forward.
Yeah, and for anybody who hasn't heard of this, I don't know if we mentioned on the show before. It is an open source project. It's essentially a personal assistant, an AI agent / personal assistant. I think the one thing, so as are many things on the internet or Reddit, it's doing all kinds of crazy stuff. The one piece of it that kind of spooks people, and I think you are kind of highlighting it, is you install it on some piece of computing. It could be your own laptop. It could be a separate Mac Mini. It could be whatever. But you basically have to give it like full access to everything. And I think that's the part that scares the crap out of people, is they're like, oh, wait a second. No. It's the equivalent of like, yeah, just give it root access to your life. And then it becomes your personal assistant and tell it what you want to do. There's some people doing some interesting stuff with it, whether it's like, it kind of cleans up my desktop. It does some things, it does whatever. But yeah, I think that's the piece that scares folks. This one feels a little bit, I guess, if we're putting it in a historical context, like we've seen, this one feels like it's right on the edge between being like, is this really important technology? Or is this like somewhere between novelty, maybe, and being like, no, to move into the next realm of this, to really be ahead of this thing, this is a mind change. This is a separate mindset that you just have to adopt, and you have to be willing to give up on certain things in order to get the other things. And I don't know which one of those it is, but we've seen some of those in the past where it's like, this is, people would call this like AI agent native, and everything else you guys are doing is sort of like hybrid AI agent because you're still human in the loop. It feels like at least a data point for these sort of psychological things of like, are you going to commit to doing this, or are you still kind of like 1 foot, on the other side of the line?
Well, we talked about it earlier, but I think, Cursor was sort of like, in retrospect, I think it was playing this transition. It kind of got us comfortable. And I think OpenClaw has sort of opened our eyes to be like, I don't need to sit at the computer. It can do everything for me.
Right.
But it's maybe just a little bit too much. And so who knows? Maybe they find a way, like put it in a VM or constrain what it's going to do, or like make it ask. Like that's sort of the next thing. And they just put OpenClaw in a foundation, which I'm sort of like, well, I feel like that means that's the end of OpenClaw, right? It's sort of like, it's not the end of OpenClaw, but it kind of means like the new ideas and the fun stuff is going to go elsewhere. And I think that's
right.
And that's why I think when OpenAI hired the founder, it's like, and of course, 1 million people are trying this. It's like, it's sort of like this is a transition. OpenClaw maybe showed us the idea of what is possible, but massively insecure. And now a bunch of people are going to be like, here's a way to do it and dial back in a way that makes you feel more comfortable. And I think that next 6 months to a year is going to be a bunch of companies doing that. And I'm interested to see like who wins.
Yeah. So, all right, man. I think we've covered a lot of stuff. I'm hoping this thing all recorded. I know there was some sort of weird glitch halfway through. Apologize for anyone who might have heard that. But yeah, thank you for being part of the last official Cloudcast. Thanks for everybody who listened for, anywhere from 1 to 1,000 episodes. But yeah, so, for anybody, again, reminder, after this show, the show will go out on Sunday, which will be the 9th or something like that. February, and starting in March, you don't have to change anything, but the name and the logo will change on your podcast player, and we're going to tweak a few things. But thank you all for listening. Thanks for telling a friend, and with that, we will see you on the Reasoning Show.
Thank you for listening to the Cloudcast. Please visit thecloudcast.net to find more shows, show notes, videos, and everything social media.